Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Jennifer Hill, a tribal education specialist at the National Conservation Training Center in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. In addition to hosting broadcasts, I have the honor of coordinating the Native Youth Climate Adaptation Leadership Congress, which is a week-long on-site program for Indigenous high school youth to grow in leadership development skills, which we welcome you to learn more about if you're interested. Before moving to our broadcast, I would like to acknowledge that the National Conservation Training Center is located on the unceded ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples. While we haven't found a full account, we are aware that many peoples traversed, cherished, and lived on this land. They include the Massawomack, the Haudenosaunee, the Shawnee, and the Delaware. As we learn more about the Indigenous peoples who continue to have relationships with this land, we better appreciate the good earth on which we work, live, and learn. And we pledge to grow and sustain relationships with Indigenous communities through collaboration on our training, outreach, youth programs, museum exhibits, and more. We encourage you to learn more about the land on which you work and reside. For 2024, I thought we'd kick off the new year by getting a better understanding on what tribal trust responsibilities mean, and specifically, what does that mean for us as federal employees? Whether we work directly with tribes or not, it's my hope that this information will help you better understand this moral obligation that each of us has. To guide us on this, we're going to hear from Melissa Castiano, Dene, and currently working with the National Park Service. A little about Melissa. Melissa is from Northwest New Mexico. She is of the Mexican clan, born for the Sauk clan. Her maternal grandfather's clan is Red Running into Water clan. Her paternal grandfather's clan is the Mexican clan. Melissa was born in Shiprock, New Mexico, and obtained her Bachelor's of Science in Wildlife Science from New Mexico State University. She began her career with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 2002 as part of the Student Career Employee Program and became a permanent biologist in the Division of Ecological Services at the Southwest Regional Office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She spent her expansive career with the service providing leadership in tribal engagement and relations and supporting the next generation of Native youth conservation leaders through service programs with partner agencies and organizations. In 2022, Melissa joined the National Park Service to serve as the National Park Service Intermountain Region's Native American Affairs Liaison. In her free time, Melissa enjoys all things outdoors: snowboarding, hiking, backpacking, camping, biking, and running. She also enjoys working out, horror and sci-fi movies and books, but most of all, hanging out with her dog, Lieutenant Ripley. Melissa, I'll now hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll start off by introducing myself in my traditional way. Melissa Castiano, Nakara Don Shi Bashchin, Dutch Ini Dashache, Nakara Dashanella. And I want to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Before I get started. Okay. As Jennifer had mentioned, I currently am now with the National Park Service as the regional liaison for the Intermountain region. I introduced myself in my traditional way, and Jennifer did mention my clans already. My tribe is a maternal clan system. I am Dene from the Navajo Reservation on the New Mexico side, and if you know the Navajo Reservation, we expand into at least 3 states, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. We're the largest tribe in the United States, and this maternal system has been helpful to know who our brothers and sisters are and our current relatives. And the joke on what I like to talk about is that if you're the same tribe as me, usually the way to get hit on from another person would be like, instead of saying, "Hey girl, what's up?" it's going to be a "Hey girl, what's your clan?" So that way you don't know that you're going to start dating your brother or sister. And that's the way to avoid incest in our tribe. and also, like I said, to know who your relatives are and who you are in relation. I graduated from Farmington High School, and like Jennifer said, she laid out basically my whole career within the federal service. I have now about 23 years almost coming this year, and love what I do. Just to give you an overview of my responsibility as a tribal liaison for the Intermountain region, this is the National Park Service's Intermountain region right here. It's the largest region, well, not counting Alaska, because my counterpart there will always tease me, yeah, right. But we do have a lot of federally recognized tribes with a lot of tribal lands, and we have a very significant tribal trust responsibility to those tribes that reside on those lands, especially being considering the history of the National Park Service, or any of our agencies for that matter, and the reason why our tribal trust responsibilities are so important and to carry out and fulfill those responsibilities. So going into that, I wanted to discuss, so I'll go into the leadership, and again, another reason why I joined the National Park Service for this during this time is, of course, our Secretary Holland, our Director Chuck Sams, and our National Native American Affairs Liaison, who has been my mentor and my go-to for everything so far and leading me in my career, as much as being a part of, I guess, my family. I call her my Auntie Dorothy, is Dorothy Firecloud. They have given a lot of assistance. They have insight and genuine, authentically Native lived experiences, and they really understand this tribal trust responsibility, as well as I, and have been crucial to the National Park Service in fulfilling those responsibilities nationwide. So I really give kudos to them and everything they've been through, as well as the start and beginning of our responsibilities through our consultation procedures and getting them to where they are today to really know what meaningful engagement and what that means. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit and for you guys to view. These are a lot of the laws and policies out there currently for land management agencies to abide by, and when they work with tribes, and give that strong foundation in why we have to carry out those tribal trust responsibilities. And I'll go back about 300 or so years ago on the origins of tribal trust responsibility and why they came to be. And that was the beginning of when treaties were made with tribes with the United States in order for to get land from the tribes, as well as offer protection and under the government, as well as the promise to have prosperity and health and happiness if we tribes were to give up their land to the federal government. So that's kind of the basis of where the tribal trust responsibility came from. Since giving over lands and now living on mostly on federal tribal reservations, the federal government was entrusted with keeping their promises, respect those treaties that were made with the tribes, and know that the tribes are trusting the United States to keep its word. Unfortunately, back in those days, a lot of the tribes did not speak English, and a lot of the interpreters were not native either, but they were able to speak to the tribes in a way that they were able to sign off on those treaties, really not understanding what they were signing, and just in order to not be annihilated or killed off, that they came into these treaties in a lot of way of that's the way they were provoked. And in these treaties, a lot of the words of protection is used. So, sorry. So therefore, when we are trying to work with tribes, we're trying to support their tribal self-government, promote their tribal economic independence, enhance tribal political and cultural well-being, and safeguard tribal trust resources such as what we work with. It's a lot of land management agencies, as in their land, their water, their air, their wildlife, vegetation, hunting and gathering, being able to access their sacred sites and perform their ceremonial, whatever that is, their traditions, which is a good segue into going into among these laws that help support that, executive orders for consultation and memos that have been updated recently to support the strengthening of nation-to-nation relationships. And then obviously the biggest one right now is our code stewardship and what that may look like and how can we fulfill those tribal trust responsibilities. And and I just kind of want to go, and I'm going to talk shortly because I like to talk to the audience and how, and get them interactive, because I like to hear from you guys as well on what some of the examples you may be doing out in with your federal agencies or within your line of work or an issue going on. So, but I'm just going to briefly go over some of this. So Secretary Order 3403 is the code stewardship and co-management that the department has issued out, and how we are mandated in as our tribal trust further along all those other laws and policies of how we work with tribes on land and waters that are the home and things that are culturally significant and the natural resources significant to tribes or affect them directly, that we need to consult on with them and get them be at the table to make decisions moving forward as federal agencies. As they, of course, as I kind of laid out, a brief history of why tribal trust responsibility through the origins of treaties have come about. And so I want to give some of the little examples in Park Service as how we are doing a little of this to strengthen and expand tribal partner code stewardship practices is working hard to work with our Park Service employees, our parks, and our leadership here to really emphasize on the relationship building and creating that trust and maintaining it in perpetuity in the future. Because you know what? Our Park Service units are not going anywhere. The tribes are not going anywhere. Those are the main relationships you should be establishing beyond anything else. They're always going to be there, and they've always been the first stewards of this land, and that's what we need to remember when we're working or doing any of our projects, that they're not that last minute add-on to any of that, that they should be always within the document of the beginning when we're trying to think of ways or think of things or projects or EAs, EISs in the future, that those are the first people you should be talking to in creating those decisions and just planning efforts, whatever that is. But it always starts with just knowing who you are. And I didn't do a whole lot in the beginning of me of who I am, but first of all, a lot of us are people first. We're human beings. We are a daughter, we're a father, we are mothers, we are sisters, we are brothers. First and foremost, our family is going to be taking a lot of precedence in a lot of what we do. And, our job, our resumes are kind of that, it's a paycheck to maintain our, put food on the table, house over our head, a car to get to work. But first and foremost, you're a person first. And that's the way I'm working with tribes, is learning their culture, learning, the history of what our actions have done to affect them, and how, obviously we can apologize, but that's not going to do much, because, a lot of us weren't living in those times, and it's now like, what can we do right from here on out? What are some small things that are tangible in our practices of work that we can do right off the bat to work with tribes and make it easier? So you have to build relationships, you have to talk, you have to know the history, and really put effort in those in the very beginning. Not just, everybody's looking straight forward to consultation, what's big C versus little c, and all of those things. And it's just like, if you just put the effort and the focus more on building on those relationships, creating those connections, and being able to just talk easily instead of having that anxiety to reach out to tribes or meeting with them, things will get easier. And that hopefully maintain long-term will be happening for every project when you move forward. So I really, really, really stress that building relationships is the key. And that's going out to the communities, that's going to tribal-led events, that's going and putting yourself in really uncomfortable situations. But if you're invited, go, take that chance and just be a person who's learning, not someone with an agenda that has to be all the time, or the only time you meet is with that agenda and for the government's purposes to move forward and check our box and say, oh yeah, we met with the tribes. So that's one thing I will always emphasize. And then also, you know, when we work with tribes, we should be looking at them as how we look at experts in their own fields when we contract out. They're subject matter experts, and we should not be exploiting their knowledge, what they bring to the table, and whatnot. And you have to remember that as agencies, there's multiple of us, and there's only one tribe and probably one person who is receiving all of these letters, all of these emails, that they're not going to be able to respond right away or pick up that call. And you're just going to, and you know, and I always emphasize, even though it might be hard, but if you do your due diligence to reach out, call, if you're, you know, within driving distance enough to make the effort to go out and see, knock on the door and say, hey, I've been trying to reach out, something going above and beyond, you know, to do that is, again, going to the trust and building a relationship. But for encompassing, for services rendered, they're taking their time out of their day, their job that they have for their tribe and for other federal agencies or state agencies or other nonprofit. So we should really be thinking of not just bringing them to the table, but also compensating for those services and making sure that they're valued and that we are not just trying to take from them, as has been the history of a lot of our agencies, you know, why we have to have these tribal trust responsibilities. Other things we're doing as Park Service is there's a guidance out for parks to, again, extend an open hand and a welcome home, like welcome home, as park units have that traumatic, historic history of pushing off our tribal partners off their own land to make a national park unit, to make any kind of federal land, to say you are no longer welcome here, because this is to the American public, which back, I forget the date, someone can put it in chat or something, about when we actually became American citizens. It was like 1970s, I believe, but along with women's suffrage. So there's a lot of things that you have to understand, and why working with tribes is very difficult and very emotional. And that's why we get, as federal employees, we have a lot of anxiety working with them. But like I said, once you learn that history and know how to go about being empathetic and figuring out how we can do better, that's the healing process right there. So one of the things in my region that I have been supporting, and hopefully our parks are, a lot of our parks are adopting, is to waive park fees for our tribal partners. Because I'll take Grand Canyon, for example, home to 11 ancestrally connected tribes that have been pushed out of the canyon. And I'll have a tribe, you know, I was born on the reservation and we never went there. I think I went there once, and it was a privilege because, you know, it was like $40 or something to get in, and my parents were poor. And we never went back again because it was expensive. Why, you know, and then and to pay to get back into our own homelands or an ancestral heritage. And the way I grew up was like, Park Service units are expensive. We can't go, but I remember going that one time when I was younger. But now it's easier. It's nice to see that a lot of families are able to, you know, get to their places instead of driving all around the park to get to their home on the other side, that they could have just easily cut through the canyon and went straight directly to their home. Now they can do that, as just they're going home, and they are welcome in the park to do that. They're welcome in the park to go and to anywhere in the site and for free. And also there's a lot of programs at the canyon that support the co-stewardship and the welcoming home of their tribal partners and making them feel welcome. And so that's just kind of one example, very general in nature, but if someone wants to chime in on that, I'll be asking questions later so you can help, add weight to those and what they're going for those who work, on site, on the ground. But that's just examples of some of the things we're doing in Park Service for co-stewardship and welcoming back our tribal partners back home. Also, other things of deepening co-stewardship practices is leveraging opportunities within commercial partnerships, grants and projects with federal funding, and employment. A lot of agreements to be made, and I will give examples of some personal, agreements and things we're doing within the region that have been a part of that we are doing on co-stewardship and even co-management. So, like I said, and ultimately striving towards formal co-management, and I'll let you see the difference. For co-management, there has to be a legal basis for that, and that's so a legal nexus. So, for example, at Canyon de Chelly, I'm going to use that because it's that park unit sits directly right on tribal trust lands of the Navajo Nation. And so there's enabling legislation that specifically says to work with the tribe to do so and abide by a tribal rule. So the tribe has a lot of authority on decision making, on permits, etc., because that park sits on tribal trust lands. So it just makes that sense that co-management could exist between the Park Service and the tribe together, making decisions together and how things will work out at that park together. So that's an opportunity that we're trying to pursue. But again, it has to be have that legal nexus of that in the enabling legislation for anything of co-management to happen. So that's a difference with co-stewardship versus co-management in a lot of ways. And yes, so someone put in, but yeah. Okay, so for examples that I put up here, this is Devil's Tower. A lot of the tribes, the Lakota tribes, like to refer to it as Bear's Lodge or Mato Titila. And example we did here was were we able to use the First Amendment and the Sacred Sites law to allow or to approve a permit for or a special use permit to allow a ceremony, the Sundance ceremony, that a couple of tribal practitioners wanted to do at the park. And I know there's examples at other parks. I think at Wind Cave they do this as well. But this was my first one that I was able to be a part of and be on site with. And it's been a long time that anybody, or if ever, I think they had a Sundance ceremony before, but it was kind of outside of the boundaries of the park. And as I understand it, this was kind of the first within the boundaries of the Park Service. And we were able to do that with those two things, the First Amendment and the Sacred Sites Act, as well as to fulfill our tribal trust responsibilities in enabling them to continue doing their ceremonies and their traditions that way on site. I may have people online in anything. So I had a question with this as I'm going through examples, and I'm hoping that maybe I can, beef up some of your ideas or some of the things you're doing right now with tribes and working with them. So my first question would be, what experience gave you, what experience that are you currently doing now that's helping you build tribal trust responsibility or fulfill your tribal trust responsibility? So that's one question I'm going to put out there. And then I will, after I give my examples, I'll go to the Q&A of interacting with the audience. So that's one question. And as I mentioned before, another thing we're doing and striving for under that Secretarial Order 3404 is co-management. And this is a picture with Canyon de Chelly. And then as I was describing, it does have enabling legislation that can allow and makes this appropriate for co-management with the Navajo Nation. We are still in the works and talks with the Navajo Nation in how bringing them to the table and how they foresee how co-management could work in the future. And what does that look like for them? Some examples that I know the superintendent there is doing is going out to the local community. There's chapter houses that, so if you're working with the Navajo Nation and you kind of understand this, and some of you, this might be foreign, since it's such a large tribe, we don't just go to the big government in Window Rock, straight to the president. We work with the community first that's being affected by. So these chapter houses, if I can make this a visual, is that they serve as states within the Navajo Reservation. I feel like so those chapter houses, I would say, would be like states. So what a chapter house would speak for a community that lives within this area designated that chapter house is responsible for. And they have elected officials who listen to the community, gather thoughts and whatnot, and what their needs are in that community. And so talking about co-management is also like giving them ideas. And then those chapter house leaders then do a resolution or something in writing to the big Navajo Nation government in Window Rock to say, this is what we want. This is what we're saying, and then they have to go. Of course, the Navajo Nation government is mimicked to the United States government. We have executive legislation and judicial branches to overlook those what the chapter house or what they receive from their communities or the chapter houses. So they make decisions that way. So, like I said, going back, we're working with the local chapter houses that have this connection to the Canyon de Chelly Park. And letting their residents know, and also letting them know that we are trying to do this joint management approach, co-management, and give them ideas of where that's currently happening. They don't have to be similar, but there's already co-management happening out in Australia with the Uluru and with Uluru. Am I saying that right? In Australia, so they're already doing that with the Aboriginal people there. And then in New Zealand is another example. And so our superintendent was able to go to Australia and kind of, see what they're doing there and came back with a presentation to show us like, this is how their co-management looks like. They have a board of directors with both tribal and their park people, and they sit at the table together to make decisions moving forward. Obviously, it's not a perfect working world. They're learning and growing as they're doing that approach. But that was just one solid example that's currently existing that we're, as a Park Service, are giving out to the tribal communities surrounding Canyon de Chelly, that this is one way we can do it, and just hopefully sparking ideas of how they could foresee moving forward doing co-management with that park. So, and that's one example, and we're still in the talks and works with that. So hopefully we have something a little more solid by the end of this year that will keep us accountable to keep moving toward co-management with the Canyon de Chelly Park. With this one, this is Saguaro, as another co-stewardship example. Saguaro National Park down in Arizona has worked with the Tohono O'odham tribe to come to a plant gathering agreement. And that's for them to help, their tribal trust responsibility to the tribe to continue their life ways. And that's gathering their traditional, the saguaro fruit and whatnot, and also working with the tribe in how to get this fruit in how they used to traditionally. And this is one tribal member giving an example or demonstrating how they do that and using their traditional methods. So there's agreement in place for them to do that on the national park down there, and they do it together. So that's a nice co-stewardship thing that in working with the tribe and fulfilling one aspect of our tribal trust responsibilities with them. So these are just certain examples. There's a lot more out there, and just in cognizant of time, I'm just giving these few examples. And then here's the big one. I know our Yellowstone National Park has been really great, and I know Grand Canyon's also has a herd as well as many other parks. But I'm involved in an interagency or multi-agency / with tribal leaders as well to get on. It's just the beginning, but it's nice to know that these agencies are working with the tribes, also have considered having seats at the table with tribes that are knowledgeable about bison management, and willing to hear and listen and incorporate Indigenous knowledge in how we manage our bison moving forward, and making that a part of the plan of these multiple agencies that are working on this. So again, another example as we're getting started to really put emphasis on our tribal trust responsibilities in working with tribes and not for tribes. So we still have a ways to go, but I'm excited for all the work that we have started or in the middle of, or even near the end. But I'm really, like I said, excited to just get a lot more out there. And like I said, these are just a few handful of examples that I have been a part of, and I'm excited for as I move into the future. I'm going to go back to that question I asked before in what experience do any of you have in building tribal trust responsibility? And then I have a second question on, which I'm curious of, has anyone ever worked with a tribe or tried to fulfill a tribal trust responsibility that just didn't actually work out? And if it did, or what was the outcome, and how were you able to continue to keep those relationships intact? So I am not sure if I can open up to people asking questions on air. Rob, is that you thing to answer?
So we actually can't open up on air. They can put in on the chat though, and I can communicate those.
Okay. So,
and we would highly encourage you to put in on the chat.
Thank you. Wasn't sure how that worked. Yeah, any incidents in 1924. Okay, so I was wrong. It was in the 70s. Yes. Yep. And we had one question. How can a tribe officially designate an area as a national park? I mean, they can go into and talk about it, but I don't know if that would be kind of a higher level at Congress to request that. And also they have to fulfill the needs or a checklist of if the area is suitable to be a national park or a national monument or a national historic area. So there's a lot of designations under National Park Service. They're not just national parks. They're either there's a certain status that they have to criteria they have to meet a certain box. So there's national monuments and national parks and NHL's National Historic Land, and I might be missing some others, but there's different designations within the National Park Service. But they can request and they can see how that could work. And I think usually a lot of these things, when we're working with tribes, when it comes to that significant level, BIA will have to be involved as well, as they are, as we hold land in trust for tribes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So I think we have a good number of folks who are non-federal on the presentation as well. So they might not know all of our lovely acronyms we like to refer to. So
yay for acronyms.
Yeah. Are you still going through your presentation, or should Rob pull us back onto screen?
Oh, I think I'm done. Hold on.
Okay,
Let's see if I
no,
have
that's
any
fine.
more.
I just wanted to check.
Thank you. And then last and foremost, another significant examples within our national park units is definitely looking for opportunities for Indigenous employees, internships, and other ways of doing that. We not even employees as well. They could be Native artisans and residents, or what else are we doing? And these are the things of, the ideas of just how creative and innovative we as a federal government could be if we just thought outside of our designated boxes. And we have these, we have the tribal trust responsibility, but they also are one of the special entities that have that sovereign status, where we have that nation to nation relationship, where the same as we would work with another nation from somewhere else, where we respect that, as well as we can think of ways to be that creative and innovative with, by using a lot of, like I said, with the ceremony on National Park Service lands, First Amendment and sacred sites lands, as well as fulfilling that tribal trust responsibility. There are ways we can do things if we were to really take the time to do that. And sometimes if you're like someone like me who has a large area of responsibility and needs a lot of assistance, and I sometimes can't focus on one thing to do that, we should really think about how we look forward, continuing that tribal trust responsibility with consistency, investing in our tribal programs, our tribal Indigenous people, because that is our connections moving forward. Especially, I always emphasize in my position, it doesn't make sense that I'm only one person. What if I leave? Then you have to start all over again. And that new person has to start all the conversations that I've already had, go out and establish some new relationships with the parks and the employees and everything. There should be more than me. It should be an actual kind of division of someone on top, someone within, below, that has that opportunity if I were to ever leave to apply for the position. But you know what? They know the work, they have the relationships, and they've learned how to work with the region under that top person, and then also an entry level person, because these tribal liaison positions are so specialized. And every time you see an announcement, it's always like a high level GS level. And a lot of our talented people that would be great for it can't even, be confident to apply, or they don't make the cert in our own processes. So that's how I see it in still fulfilling our tribal trust responsibilities, that consistency part within our government agencies, and think about how we can, get people in those places and do a good job as a team, as also a succession, and keep those relationships with tribes. And I'm using park units as an example, but with my previous job with Fish and Wildlife Service, refuges, field offices, on the ground people, because that's what it means a lot. And that's what tribes will really appreciate as well, is that consistency, and that person or those people that they constantly are always talking with, and also who kind of get it and how to work with tribes as well. So that's a little bit on another addition to co-stewardship and working with tribes and fulfilling that tribal trust responsibility that I was just going to throw in there. Yeah. So ready for some questions? Let's see.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. So we do have some questions that have come in, and I think some responses to the questions you posed. Excuse me. So let's see. So someone responded, I think, to what you had asked, that they are working with the tribe to restore populations of an important first food plant on a refuge and partnering with contaminants testing with the intention of making the plant accessible for harvest. So that sounds like a comment and a response to what you had asked as a trust responsibility.
Okay, and John, remember John? Hi, John. Fish and Wildlife
Yeah,
Service
John.
Southwest is hosting
John
tribal
is
leadership.
on.
Nice on the summits, and that's the thing too, is that I know that we as federal agencies, again, as something, thinking of those tribal capacity issues as well as ours, but also partnering up as sister agencies sometimes to do some of those things. So maybe I need to catch up with you, John. Yeah, they're conservation priorities. And okay, nice.
And then Linda is working closely. Oh, the BLM headquarters Division of Wildlife Conservation, Aquatics, and Environmental Protection is working closely with the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society to build relationships and opportunities. Yeah, and I know BLM has been a close partner with us, Fish and Wildlife NCTC, for the Native Youth Congress. Also part of the trust responsibility.
Yep. I was going to put that on there, but I'm glad you mentioned that, Jen.
Yeah. And for those who are new or on this call maybe, or the broadcast for the first time, the Native Youth Congress that I sometimes talk about, probably a little bit too much. Melissa was the lead for that prior to myself coming on, and we kind of, what she was mentioning was kind of a lead and a co-lead, building those relationships. So I was like her shadow, building those relationships. So the tribal members got to know myself and build those relationships under Melissa's guidance and build that trust prior to Melissa moving on. So those relationships could continue to grow until I came into that position. And so those relationships would be able to flourish and not have to start all over again from the very beginning, which was a blessing. And that's all about continuing that trust responsibility and upholding that.
Yes. Beautifully described, Jen. Thank you. And that is an example of that consistency and continuing those relationships and maintaining them. I don't know if a lot of you know Jennifer firsthand or been to the Native Youth Congress, but hopefully we always try to expand and think better and how we can improve. But her nickname there is Squirrel. And a lot of our tribal partners, even other government agencies that have been with us for a long time or been part of that program since it started, all know her by that nickname I gave her, and I'm really glad she's embraced it. But it's nice to know that she's well known among the tribal communities that she reaches out to, and she's not a stranger. So I really felt good when I left the program to move out west to be a liaison. That program was in good hands, and it's still ongoing and going strong. So thanks for that example.
And so, Melissa, Rob has just shared your contact information in the chat. So if you're good, we can probably stop screen sharing now and continue the conversation.
Yeah, hold on one second. Okay.
see your beautiful face.
I can't see
And it
yours.
says, oh, that's because I always forget to turn on my camera. There we go. Let's see. Dawn says, we're trying to improve our efforts more effectively to work with tribes. She works with Arizona State Parks and Trails, and she's responsible for statewide outdoor recreation planning. So it sounds like she's working with tribes and the state collectively in a response to the question you posed, Melissa.
Nice. You should, it sounds like on the line of work, we have a Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program with the Park Service, but they specifically work outside of the park units with communities. And we just hired a new Indigenous engagement coordinator for that program for the region, and his name is Jared Wakini. And he has been great. So he's just started the position a couple months ago, but that's something that we, like I said, he works outside within tribal communities specifically to provide grants and whatnot for those kind of, getting tribal members out into the natural state and building trails or whatever they want to get access to, maybe even to their sacred sites on their reservations that they never had before. So maybe that might be a good hookup for you. Just look him up or call me and I can hook you guys up.
So what's one thing that you would like those to know from today's conversation, those who don't maybe work directly with tribes? What's one thing that you'd like them to know or take away about their understanding on their role with the Federal Indian Trust responsibility? Like, what's their role if they don't work directly with tribes, like our administration officers or someone else in the field?
Yeah. So if you don't work directly with tribes, a lot of the work we do does have some kind of implications on tribal resources, usually. So if you're in like a planning or something that's really detached from like the front lines of actually being at a tribal consultation, just think about those of if this would affect tribal natural resources or their way of life or anything like that, and put that in your planning processes or your kind of line of work, and think of, do tribes need to be at the table for this from the beginning? Because a lot of our work and what we get a lot of feedback from tribes is that they're always the last minute add-on, or like, oh, we need to go for tribal consultation. So it's like a quick call or a quick meeting. And it's just like telling them about the project and we've already made our decision. They already know that. That's not real tribal consultation. That's just checking your box saying, oh yeah, we met with tribes. So for those, like you're in the process of like you just behind a desk and not really, just think about, do we need tribal consultation? Do we need to meet with tribes? Is it affecting their life, their water, their fish, their land, their ancestral areas like Park Service does with their cultural significant sites or sacred sites that we may be affecting that we need their feedback on? Anything, that's what I feel like is to help support tribal trust responsibility, is think of those things in advance before we do anything. And the other one is just understand the history of your agency and how those really affected tribes. And again, like I say, it's just like, how can you understand that? How are we learning from that? And how can we do better into the future? And people call them allies, but I don't think allies is a strong enough word for those who are not Native or don't really have this passion. But sometimes we have a lot of people who get an understanding and have that empathy and have that really heartfelt, we got to do the right thing. And so those are more, I like to describe them as accomplices. And it's not, doing a crime or anything. It's like legitimately having like someone in the car saying, let's do this together, instead of someone being an ally and stepping outside of the car with their sign that I stand with you in solidarity. that doesn't do much for us. So that is something I really, just would really appreciate from a lot of our people. Even if you don't get it, we're here to help. And there's not a huge community, but there's a community of us that this is what I'm saying. And I have to thank my elders who have been in the federal service, who have paved the way for me to be here today, to be in my position, to still continue to help mentor me and give more energy into our tribal trust responsibilities and how we think creatively, how we can be innovative, how we can make this fun, how we can really make this meaningful. So I really thank those to my elders before me to create this and help me along the way, because this is not easy work. This should have been done when Park Service units were made and forced off, or any of our things. But you know what? We can't change the past. We can only do better in the future. And thank you for hearing me out today and being on. And again, I hope, this sparks some kind of thing, and we are here to help as much as we can and give you some background information and however we can be helpful. So thanks.
Thanks, Melissa. We do have some more questions coming in. I think we might have time for one or maybe two more. So we'll start with one and see how that goes. Before we do have to close at the top of the hour. So we're going to start with this one. How do you build an agency culture? Because I think this spans DOI. How do you build an agency culture that values and provides support for staff to do the important work of building relationships? Specifically, does National Park Service allocate staff time, particularly for building relationships?
So, for an agency culture, okay, so I don't think they allocate time for building relationships. That's something you're going to have to build on your own. But make sure it's a part of your work. You put it along with your work. It's not, but also, like I said, some of the greatest relationships that are ever built are outside of our working conditions or our agendas. It's just going to a meal or sharing, a drink with someone, or just going to a tribal-led event, whether it's a powwow or a feast day, or, just something that puts you, that isn't part of your work too. And then it's unfortunately not compensated for. It's just your job and going above and beyond of what your requirement is. And also to build a culture. We are working on that as we speak, but it's so hard, like I said, accomplices are so much better to get things through. But one thing I know, especially if you want to recruit and retain and return Indigenous employees, is that you need to create a safe environment for them. And that's letting them be able to have mentorship and suggestions, possibly from someone who might look like them, or build a community of not just hiring one or two interns, but having a group together that they can have a supportive relationship together to talk through things, through issues, through hardships, through maybe some kind of issue that, that a non-native person or a supervisor that they're not comfortable going to do that. So we're a long way, but we are still trying to build that and just kind of incorporate that tribes, even within our own agencies, as we recruit them, we still need, we make sure that they can be themselves, that they don't have to be one or the other or lose their identity. We should be learning from them, since, they're the ones that have that connection to the tribes that we may be working with, and get a little bit of, some of their story, how they grew up, maybe some of the stories they have on site. They probably heard that from their grandparents or from their parents' and stuff. So it's really just listening and learning, and not trying to direct or dominate certain things. Because as we know, as government agencies, we like to do the hierarchy and put people in their place and make them adapt to the government agency. And that doesn't always work all the time. And I can tell you, in my 23 years, starting in that kind of capacity, being only always the brown person in a agency or in that office, it's not comfortable. And I didn't really have leadership to guide me in my career. And until 12 years later, I finally found it. And NICALC and the Native youth pretty much revived my passion for doing this work and why it's important and why I have that responsibility to make it better for those who come behind me, as well as for those relationships outside of our agencies, to work with them and try to understand and communicate, to people who do the work with the tribes, just to, again, learn the history, be a person, create that relationship. And that's again, you're not going to be compensated. You're not going to be a huge pat on the back. It's a lot of emotional, mental, and physical and spiritual work if you really care about it. I can say that it takes a lot for me to do this, and some of the work we do where I shake my head and it affects me, but have to keep going and think how we can do better next time. So I don't think I really completely answered your question on that, but there's not one way to do anything when it comes to relationships and with tribes and culture and a way of living. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think that's a whole new broadcast. Walking into worlds.
I did appreciate some our director's comment, because I did ask them this, and just to see what someone in super leadership who's Indigenous and a government employee, and he told me, and it really resonated with me, and this is what I would share too, is that he's like, there's not two worlds, there's only one world, and that's where you grew up. That's you, that's your background, your culture, your language, your family, everything like that, that's you, that you bring to the table. And then when you work in these government agencies, all of this is distractions. And you try to find a way to how to influence who you are into those decisions or to ideas or whatnot, and just continue to be yourself, because that's who you are in the first place. Is never lose that identity and never try to split yourself apart. So, and I know sometimes I do feel like I'm this person, government person, Melissa, and then I'm like Indigenous, but then again, I have to remember to center myself and say, I'm me first, and this is what I know, and then start, like I said, listening, learning, appreciating, respecting, and try to figure out ways of how we can do better. How can I do my job better moving forward? So that was what I got from our director, from someone in such a high level leadership. And he got that from somebody else, one of his elders, but that was a really good, amazing answer that I thought I can live with.
Yeah, I love that. Just sticking true to who you are and not, okay, well, we're not going to go into all that. All right, one last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. Are there any particularities to consider when trying to engage with Hawaiian communities and or Alaska Native communities? Quick answer, and then we'll call it a day.
Sorry, guys, I have a call back to back after this, so that's probably the reason she's trying to push. So the particularities, just know that they're different from the what Native Alaskans call us is the lower 48, and to the Native Hawaiians were the Big Island, or the mainland. Is mainland. And just know that they're going to be completely different than anything you've learned from us at the at the Big Island or the mainland or the lower 48. They have their own cultures. They are, again, not just one, Native Hawaiian community. They have their differences within their those areas. And they have their own songs, their own religions, their own stories about certain things. So again, just come with an open heart, open mind, and don't put anybody in one box. Just listen and just take it all in and just be respectful and figure out how you can, maybe find that commonality of, not being uncomfortable anymore, but also create that understanding that you're there to learn and you're there to respect and you're there to figure out how to continue in your work moving forward. Same with Native Alaskans. They are all different tribes up there. They are all living in different areas of the state, and they all have their own stories again. So same thing, just approach with open heart and open mind and just listen and try to figure out how the best way moving forward and get their buy-in too. Don't make decisions for them. So that's just kind of the off the cuff answer I have for you.
Thank you, Melissa. You are so wonderful. One day you're going to adopt me. Until then, we thank you all for joining, and we thank you, Melissa, for your time. I know it's always very precious and you're rushed from one thing to the next. So for those of you, if you have an outstanding question that you didn't get answered, send it to me, Jennifer_Hill at fws.gov, and I will try to get it answered for you. We hope you can join us next month on Wednesday, February 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for our next broadcast adventure. Yet to be determined, but I think it'll be a good one. And as a reminder, each broadcast is recorded and available on NCT's website. If you wish to learn more about the broadcast series or to be added to the monthly listserv, all you have to do is reach out to me. And I'll add you to that. And as always, we welcome any broadcast suggestion. Again, it's Jennifer_Hill, HILL at fws.gov. And thank you all for joining. Melissa, thank you very much for your time. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye, all.